Articles of Confederation, Congress, or really even the states dictating what those rules were. So we can look at that. In 1861, there was a convention held, a peace conference they call it, by the states that were still left in the Union to try to come up with some amendments to avoid the Civil War. Now, it wasn't done pursuant to Article 5, but it in every other way mimicked Article 5. So we can look to that as well to see what kind of, what we would expect the convention to look like. And so we believe, first of all, the states and this Mount Vernon Assembly, they've gotten together to set the rules in one part from a political standpoint to kind of send the signal to Congress, hands off. We've got it under control. That's one thing. But if it ever came to the point of, let's say Congress tried to pass a law, I don't think it'll get that far because I think there's enough folks like you in Congress that would keep, I'm expecting you to be there, Barry,
We're relying on you.
Would keep that from happening. But if Congress passed such a statute, it's almost certain the convention would ignore it if they tried to pass it. I mean, it's almost certain they'd ignore it. And then Congress would be in the position of having to sue to enforce it. And one, I don't think politically they can get away with that. I just think politically this convention would be seen in such a light that the people would understand, hands off Congress, this is why we're doing it, because of you. But secondly, I think they lose. And the constitutional scholarship, I mean, there are some out there that do argue that Congress can try to interject itself into it. But if you go back and read the minutes of the Constitutional Convention as were kept by various members of the convention, it's clear that this Article 5 process, it was intended to give the states a way to bypass Congress. That's what they were talking about. Congress was hands off. And I think a court would see that together with the history of the other conventions would not allow Congress to do that.
Can I ask you one more?
Sure.
Do you have a list of priorities? Let's say if you can only get one done, which one would that be? Because historically we've never had an Article 5, but we got within one or two states,
Right.
which unfortunately resulted in the 17th Amendment, but basically it forced Congress to act. If we were to get close enough and it forced Congress to actually act, what would be the #1 priority? I mean, if y'all discuss which would be the most important to get done.
If you're talking about a situation where Congress does something to hopefully ward off the convention, I don't think it'll happen this time. Okay. In talking with Scott Rogers at the Balanced Budget Amendment Task Force, they're saying, I think they're going to get there first. I think they're going to be the closest because they have a head start. They've got 20 that have already been passed. Most of those go back to the 80s and 90s, and those calls are still considered alive and right. That's why they're ahead. But what I think is going to happen is that they're going to get there. And we're going to kind of see everything fall out at that point. But even Scott Rogers has told me that if Congress attempted to pass a balanced budget amendment to ward off their call for a convention, that's not going to slow them down. They want a convention. And if Congress wants a competing one out there, that's fine, because they know that whatever Congress passes will have so many loopholes in it that it'll effectively be, it won't really hold much water. They want to come up with one that'll really force Congress to stay on task. So they're not going to stop at that. But even if they did, the Convention of States is coming right behind it, and there's just not one you can pick there that's going to slow them down. And I know the guys behind the Convention of States, they're not going to be slowed down. This is a train that has left the station. It's going to be awful hard to slow it down. Yes, sir.
Would the states have equal representation, or would it be based on population size?
It is the clear rule for the conventions is one state, one vote. So a state can name 9 delegates, 5 delegates, 3 delegates, 1 delegate. I mean, New York had 1 delegate at the 1787 convention. That's because 2 of them left when they started to rewrite the Constitution. But anyway, the state, I mean, can send as many delegates as they want, and it's anticipated it'll be an odd number because the majority vote within that casts the one vote that state has. Now, once they get there, if they want to change those rules, they can, but it's not expected that they will.
Well, they can change the rule of one state, one vote.
They could if they decided to.
They could.
It's not going to happen because
Which is why we need
the
volunteers.
26, there's going to be 26 smaller states that aren't going to be in favor of that.
Well, you can think of it, I mean, when you talk about these rules, and somebody mentioned, Barry mentioned earlier about writing the rules when you get there, we can think of it in our party system as our conventions, you know, in our district and our state convention, where it's essentially the same premise. We come in with rules, but we have to adopt those rules, and we can change them, or we can throw them out. We did it in our 11th district, those guys who wanted to take over the convention got the rules thrown out, but they hadn't had any forethought to realize once they did that, yeah, there was no rules, and they had to completely rewrite the rules.
And the Mount Vernon Assembly is the beginning of the process of setting up the rules. Because again, when you get to the 32, 33, 34 state, they're going to be using every argument they can use to convince those legislators not to pass the resolution. And one of the arguments they'll use is, well, we don't know what the rules are going to be at this convention. No telling what'll happen. Well, we'll already have a set written for them to avoid that argument. I mean, a lot of good planning going into this. Which is another reason why I think it'll happen. Well, let me say one last thing then. Thank y'all for your attention. I had the real honor of, I was asked to and did play a role in a play that was put on, and I wish I could remember the group, a conservative group up in Rome. We put on a play called Our Founding Fathers. And that play was about the 1787 convention. And I had the opportunity to play the entire delegation from North Carolina because we didn't have enough people volunteer. So I got to play 3 people. So I jokingly like to say this: if we have an Article 5 convention, I hope that all these legislators that I'm making friends with will give me the honor of serving as a delegate to it. And then I will be in the unique position of being able to say that I'm the only person that was a delegate to both conventions.